Here's another piece in my Lush series. This one has kind of a early morning dawn vibe to it. Got a little spring fever, so that's going to be my message for this piece. Can't wait till that warm weather comes. This is a 16 by 20, and I've got some molding paste on this. I also have some gel molding paste on the top. That's why it looks a little yellow up there. And then the bottom has regular molding paste. I was just trying to get rid of two different types. Since I was going to cover it all up, it really didn't matter. I put some really beautiful bronze on here. Bronze is kind of like velvet or suede. It depends on which direction your brush goes, and you have to really be careful that you have all your strokes going in the right direction. But since we're going to cover this up mostly, it doesn't really matter that much. You'll see throughout most of my paintings that I am painting the sides of my paintings. Sometimes it's just a solid color, but a lot of times I've got a little bit of the stems and the flowers on the sides as well. Now that I've got some of this bronze on there, you can see the texture that molding paste made. I wanted to get some really nice horizontal texture going in. And also, once I get some of the other paint on it, there'll be a lot of vertical going on. This horizontal texture in the background gives it a little bit more of a moving feel. It might be the wind's blowing or there's waves in the background. People really interpret it a lot different ways, but definitely you get motion. The color I'm using is called Gray Purple, and it's by Master's Touch. I like to call it periwinkle. It really looks like a periwinkle to me. Now I'm putting some white in there. I want a lighter value as we go down to the horizon line. I'll also put some white in for some clouds. I've realized that I've covered up all that beautiful bronze I put in. So I'm going to be taking a towel, see there, and I'm wiping that off. In the long run, I put way too much color over that bronze. I wanted some of it to peek through, and I didn't have nearly as much as I wanted peeking through at the very end. I need to do this next step when the paint's pretty wet. So I've got a wooden skewer here, and I'm going through and I'm making some marks. This is going to look a little bit like grass. That scratch through is allowing that bronze to show through. Sometimes I use a stylus tool. You could use a fork, you could use a nail, anything that's kind of sharp to scratch through the wet layer, but not scratch the layer underneath. I got a really deep violet that I'm using for the foreground and the middle ground, and when those two colors kiss, I will blend those in nicely together. Once I get that foreground and middle ground in, I want to quickly go and get my bamboo skewer and scratch through to the bottom layer again. Looks like I might have my stylus in my hand this time, or maybe, nope, I've got that bamboo skewer, just holding it down a little closer. The scratch throughs that I made through the sky, sometimes I'm meeting those up and going straight down into the foreground as well. Sometimes it's just a lot more random than that. Now I've got some of the foreground paint, that violet, and I'm bringing my foliage, my stems up into the sky. You can see where it skips over the texturized area. I really am purposely doing that. I want to see that texture. I want to get lots of different lengths here so it's not so uniform. I also want it to be going in all different directions. Occasionally you pull some of that lighter value color down into your darker foreground. So you'll see me, I'll be fixing that up, bringing that violet back in there to cover some of that lighter value. In this background, normally I'm going from a darker value to a lighter value, or dark colors to brighter colors. I did start with that violet, and when it dries it will be just about as dark as this Prussian blue. This Prussian blue is also from Master's Touch, but it's one of their thick body paints. I can't find this Prussian blue in any of the other paints in the store, at least brands that I like. The reason why I go from a darker value to the lighter values and brighter colors is because that really adds depth. When you have the darker colors and darker values down, and then you go over them with a lighter, it pushes back those darker values and really makes it look like it is going back into the painting. I want to point out two things at this stage. You can see in the foreground that I have left so you can see some of that copper. That's something I really do like. Unfortunately, later on, I just cover way too much of that up. The one thing I don't like, over kind of to the right of the middle, there's a piece of grass that goes almost all the way straight up off of the top of the painting. I really don't like that. That just is cutting the painting off there. In the long run, I don't think it's as noticeable. There's enough things that I put over it that it sets it back enough that it's a little bit not as distracting. My next color and value is, I believe that's an emerald green. And that one's also a master's touch. And I'm doing basically the same thing as I did before. I'm using an angular brush and I'm just putting those stems, foliage, whatever you want to call them, in there. And still trying to get them going in different directions. But you can kind of see how that lighter value just pushes back those darker values behind it. At each layer, I've been making sure I do the sides the same color as the front. Here you can see I'm getting some of that green on the sides. So there will be a little bit on the sides that'll have some of the stems, and there'll be some little small flowers on the side. Not a whole lot to distract you from the front. Well, if you have a rule, you have to break it. Now I'm using olive green, and the olive green is Liquitex Basic. Its value is a little bit darker than that emerald green, but I decided with this not as bright painting, since it's more like a dawn, the sun hasn't quite came up yet, it needed another little bit more muted color in here. So I went ahead and chose the olive, and again I'm doing the exact same thing as I was doing before. Now my last color is a light green. Now I've got all these different colors of stems and foliage, and it's really looking like some nice good grass to put some flowers into. I've grabbed my color wheel now and I'm showing you here. These are the colors that I've been using, and I'm trying to get a good color scheme going. So I went to the opposite side of the color wheel, and I think the majority of my flowers are probably going to be those colors there, because I've got some of those greens in there in the grass as well. I've done purple and yellow flowers before and didn't enjoy them, so I'm not sure why I'm doing them again. In the end, they look okay in this painting. I think if I were to do purple and yellow again, I would have more yellow and they would be much smaller flowers. I just think those will look a little bit more realistic, even though this really isn't a realistic painting. Here I start doing some smaller purple and yellow flowers. I do wish I had more yellow in this. By this point on my palette, the purple and the yellow have mixed in different places, so I'm not getting the right amount on my palette knife that I really should have for what I'm thinking I would do next time. But they still look pretty cute. I'm going to add some little centers to my bigger flowers with my palette knife. A lot of times I use the squirt bottle with paint, and when I have a bigger area, I do like to use the palette knife sometimes too. Time for some stems. I've got my squirt bottle out and I have a dark violet in here. I want to make sure that I don't just make stems going straight down from the flower like a kindergarten painting. These stems, a lot of times I'm going off to the side, and it's okay to go, straight down on some of them. You just don't want a bunch of vertical flowers, just straight lines going down your painting. You got enough lines going on as it is in here. on these little flowers. I make it a little bit thicker there at the top, just like a normal flower would have a little bit more green there at the top. I also use this dark violet on my first flowers. That way, as I put more flowers on there and move more forward in the picture, I'm going to use lighter values. That way they stand out and the darker values set back. Now I'm starting this leafy vine here. I like to put these in and make sure that I have a nice dark value so they sit back in the painting. You're going to hear me say over and over again about values, dark values, light values, and how they really put depth into your painting. In reality, these leafy plants here really probably should have been put in before the flowers. I'm not really sure why I haven't started doing that. You can see I have to work around this petal here, and I do want these to look like they're sitting behind the flowers. Probably in the next painting, I'm going to experiment with that. I think it'll go a lot better. That way I'm not trying to work around the petals of the flowers that I've already got in. Let's take a closer look at these leafy vines. I got a really small palette knife and I'm just dabbing them in. I'm wanting them to go the same directions. It doesn't really matter if they touch that center line. I want it to be pretty random, so some of them can, some of them don't have to. I'm getting the size. I want the size somewhat the same, but of course, you know, your leaves on your plants are never exact, so it's okay with some variation. I'm also thinking about the texture because later on I will be putting some accents on them. Now I've started those orange flowers. They got a little bit of fuchsia on the tip and also a little bit of that bronze. I don't normally put a metallic on the flowers, but in this painting I wanted to try it out and I really do like how it ended up in the end. Here we go with some stems. Now you can see I've got this bright chartreuse green in my squirt bottle. And again, I'm making it a little more thick at the top of the flower. Whenever I go down with the squirt bottle, I am not trying to make a solid line. If there's skips in the paint, that's fine with me. Now these flowers would be my lightest in value. Obviously that fuchsia isn't the lightest color, but the lighter color there, it's a little bit hard to see. It is that chartreuse green, but I have put a lot of white and white molding paste in it, and it almost turns into this yellow color. In the later stages of my painting, I do have to be thinking about where I'm putting these flowers. I'm really looking at the composition and seeing where they need to go. And I'm not worried about putting them on top of other elements I've put in there. Like that one went on top of that long leafy vine there. But that helps put that leafy vine back into the background and bring that flower forward. Looks like we missed putting in some of these lavender flowers, but I did want you to see how I'm using the squirt bottle to put that top part of that flower in there where the vine's going to be coming out or the stem's going to be coming out. You saw I waited there for a second. I wanted to figure out which way I wanted my stem to go because I don't want them all going in the same direction. I need as much variety as I can get in here. So even my smallest flowers here are fairly big. I like to get some teeny tiny elements in. So I have my stylus tool and I've got some silver paint and I'm just painting in these little itty bitty flowers. I'm still keeping in mind my composition. I'm looking for places that are kind of open, that need something, but really doesn't need something big. I'm also looking about what colors I'm putting the silver on top of. There's places that I know that I want to get them in that rich purple area, kind of in the middle of the painting, horizontal wise. That color, that silver really looks good there. But I'm not just going to put it in that area. I have to look at the composition as well. Now I've got a really thin paintbrush in that chartreuse green color, and I'm getting in the stems of these teeny tiny flowers. I don't need a lot of paint on there at all to suggest that those are stems. I want to make sure that I keep it really loose and make really light brush strokes. Let's take a close look here. Notice how I pause and I go underneath of that purple stem. Normally that value, that lighter green value, would be on top, but I didn't do that because the stem is more raised. There's more paint on there, and it would have looked really weird for just that little wisp of green to go on it. I do the same thing here. I skip underneath that dark color because I know that that has more texture, and that texture is also going to bring that forward instead of the value. The only flowers that I put on the sides are these little teeny tiny flowers. Sometimes I do put the raised flowers on the side, but this time I just decided to keep it simple. I realized that I needed some little thin grasses going up in the sky. So that's what I'm doing here with the same chartreuse color and my really thin paintbrush. If you've enjoyed this video, it would really help if you like and subscribe, and also comments. Comments really help. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you didn't like. Tell me what you would like to see me do.